Okay. Good morning, everybody. So today I'm Joan and Nicole, and Joan and Nicole are me because we're reversing roles. So they're going to take most of the session today. So you're in for a treat. They were both saying that they didn't sleep very well last night because they were excited. I was thinking, is this like, are they outside the window of tolerance or, I don't know. So then I looked on ChatGPT because I was thinking, well, is excitement outside? I've never kind of thought about that. And ChatGPT said, no, like most of the time if you're excited, you're still in the window of tolerance. But this makes sense because if you remember polyvagal theory, when you're the foot brake is ventral vagal, you're in connection with others. So it's kind of like your system is excited, you're kind of like mobilizing energy. So it's sympathetic activation. So there's a lot of adrenaline, but you're still in touch with everything, which is like more ventral vagal as opposed to dorsal. So it's the foot brake as opposed to the handbrake. That makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you guys, but so yeah. So hope you stay awake through the whole things. Yeah. So let's get going. I think you turned on the recording for today. Okay. Yeah. So I try to include some quotes sometimes. So I really like Rumi. He has fabulous quotes. And so this one is for quotations. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Okay, so that's kind of my motto. It's not right or wrong. It's like understanding, right? Not judging. Okay. So this is where we are. So this is week 20 out of 32. So we're not quite 2/3 of the way, but almost. For those that are interested, I did kind of add, it's a pilot session, it's session 33. It won't be kind of like this session because we won't have all the introduction, we won't have homework, but it's, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed that there's kind of a gap in terms of bonding, like how we bond to intimate relationships and sexuality. I thought, oh, let's try adding that. But it's kind of a session where it's kind of, we're workshopping it. So it kind of, if you want to come, you don't have to, but we welcome people's feedback afterwards and make changes to it. And then if you find this is helpful next year, we'll try to include it. So add more. So soon there'll be like a second season. Like the first season, second season, right? We won't have time in a year to cover everything. Okay, so oh yeah, just want to tell you about a couple of last minute changes. We're always changing and updating the course. So I decided to reverse the order of sessions 21 and 22. In the past, the next session, so session 21 would have been an introduction to internal family systems, right? And then session 22 is about talking about spirituality. But I kind of realized that doesn't make sense because internal family systems is a very spiritual approach. And so it's better to have our so the spirituality session before our break. That'll be our last week next week. Then we have 2 weeks break. And when we come back, I don't want to leave a big gap because when we come back, we'll get into internal family systems. And then we'll have like a bridge session between the introduction to internal family systems. We're going to have a bridge session that's going to try to help you link everything we covered in the first 2/3 of the course with what we're going to cover. And then we're going to launch into, that's the section of the course that's totally new for us, which is internal family systems. We're going to go through the manual because internal family systems are really good stage 2, second stage processing trauma. And I think like people really enjoy it. And this is the first time we're having, quite a lengthy internal family systems session, but I think it's really worth it. And Kate is going to be quite involved in that. And we're also, there's a young man who's a internal family systems therapist who just does internal family systems all the time. and he's a master's in social work. He practices in London, so he's going to be joining us. We're going to meet together because I think he knows more about internal family systems than I do. So he's going to help us present that section. So that'll be interesting. You'll get to meet another person. Okay. So let me explain. I think I already did, but let me explain a little bit why I've inversed the order of the session. So I introduced the spirituality session before the IFS session. In this course, we consider mental health from a bio, psycho, social, and spiritual perspective. So we kind of look at mental health from all those different lenses, right? And according to this model, the bio, psychosocial, spiritual model, spirituality is one of the core dimensions of being human. But I realize that so far we haven't really touched on it very much, right? So if we're going to say we're bio, psychosocial, spiritual, we do have to cover it. So in the course, we've already explored biological maps. Instincts are biological. Polyvagal theory is biological as well. So that biological maps inform our understanding of trauma. And we've explored a lot of psychological maps. Mostly are based on psychodynamic, which is psychodynamic theory is about there's an unconscious, right? That's like Freud stuff. So attachment is psychodynamic theory. Erikson stages psychodynamic theory as well. We've also talked quite a bit about social maps. For example, social determinants of health, like how social or factors influence how well we are, how long we live, our health. So we've talked quite a bit about that in different parts of the course. So it makes sense to introduce a spiritual map, which is just as foundational as these other three maps to the approach we're taking in this course. In the spirituality session, we'll introduce Ignatian spirituality, which will sound very familiar to most people, because Ignatian spirituality is, if you kind of like a little familiar with Christianity, right? It's very much the standard model of Christianity. It essentially says that the thoughts, feelings, that this is Ignatian spirituality, thoughts, feelings, and impulses that arise within us do so because of the influence of spirits that are more or less mature, and that our role as human beings is to learn to discern and choose which of these spirits we listen to. One of the things I'm going to talk about is that this model, it's anticipated internal family systems because it's so similar, uses slightly different language, but it's very, very similar to Carl Jung's model of the mind, Carl Jung's psychology, and it's very, very similar to internal family systems. So it makes sense to talk about spirituality, especially the Ignatian spirituality model, because then you'll see the similarities, and I'll point them out, to internal family systems. So similar. They use slightly different language, but very, very similar. So to do that, we use a deep observing center embodied in the figure of Jesus. That's what Ignatian spirituality does, but it could be Buddha, Socrates, Confucius, Muhammad, other traditions. So those stand in internal family systems. That's this capital S self, the observer. In Ignatian spirituality, it's Jesus. You'll see the similarities. I'm not going to go into it a lot today. So this Christian model is based on the philosophical idealism, which many modern people think has been thoroughly debunked by scientific materialism or physicalism. That's the notion that what is really essential in the universe is matter, and that mind arises from matter. The brain is made up of atoms, and our mind, which is like being sentient, feelings and thinking and all that. It's all a very complex organization of matter. Okay, and that's kind of like our assumption in Western society. There's more and more people that are reverting back, because most through history, most people have been philosophical idealists, meaning mind comes first. So the mind of God, or mind comes first and creates matter, right? But now, like, there's a new wave of idealism. It's kind of like a more scientific idealism, that mind is what essential in the universe. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because it has a lot of implications for meaning, right? So get into that a little bit. Many contemporary thinkers are now presenting very compelling arguments for exactly the opposite. Idealist views are debunking materialist ones. Okay? The Ignatian spiritual map, although using very different language, bears an uncanny resemblance not only to internal family systems, but also to Jungian psychology and Bernardo Castro's analytical idealism. By exploring spirituality first, we lay the groundwork. Then, when we introduce internal family systems, it won't feel maybe as strange to you because you'll see the similarities to, that Christian. And I'm not advocating one religion or another. I'm just pointing out historically that there are similarities. So hopefully it will feel like a map describing something you already recognize from your own experience, the internal family systems. So before our March break, we'll have a spirituality session. When we come back refreshed, we'll dive into internal family systems and spend the bulk of the rest of our time together doing that. Okay, so that's just to say I switched that order. And that was just in the last week I did that. Okay, that's where we are. So week 20, February 25th. Next week, March 4th, spirituality. Then we break for 2 weeks, the 11th and 18th. There's no course. There's also those weeks, there's also no point group. I'll point that out again. And then we're back March 25th. And we go until June the 10th, if people want to come to that extra session, the bonding and sexuality session. All right, so having said all that, let's do our mindful practice to begin with. So I invite you to spend a few moments checking in with yourself, okay? And questions you might ask yourself right now, what's the current risk that you'll experience a crisis, right? Is it low, moderate, high, very high, or extreme? Ask yourself. Second question you might ask yourself is, are you in the window of tolerance right now? Yes, maybe a little outside or very outside. And if you're very outside, I think it would be good to try to use some of the skills we talked about in this course, like grounding, self-soothing, distraction. Try to bring yourself, because it'd be hard for you to absorb anything in the course if you're outside the window of tolerance. Where's your energy tank? Is it full, 3/4, half? Is it near empty? And have you been tracking your targets using the whole diary card? How would you rate your targets right now? Okay. And how well are you focusing on what you're doing? For example, this course. All right, so let's do our 5-minute mindfulness practice. So let's begin by taking a comfortable posture, be it on the floor, and sitting in a way that feels supportive to you. If it feels safe, you can gently close your eyes or simply soften your gaze. Take a slow breath in through the nose and a longer breath out through the mouth. Allow your body to settle. Now bring your attention to the points of contact between your body and what's supporting you. The chair, the floor, gravity holding you. Notice your breath as it is, without changing it. Just observe the rise and fall. The body breathing itself. If your mind wanders, that's not a problem. Gently bring your attention back to the breath and the body. Now, silently acknowledge that each of us has different ways of knowing. You might notice your emotional mind, your sensations, feelings, impulses, and urges. No need to analyze them, just notice them. You might also notice your rational mind, your thoughts, plans, judgments, explanations. Again, just notice. Neither your thoughts or your feelings are right or wrong. They're just part of being human. Now imagine a place within you that is able to see both your emotional and your rational minds. In DBT, we call this wise mind. Wise mind is not loud. It doesn't argue. It has a calm, grounded quality. From wise mind, you can sense what matters to you, what you need, and what a situation actually calls for. Take a few breaths resting here. If it helps, you might silently say on the inhale, here, and on the exhale, now. From this wise mind place, gently bring to mind the fact that relationships are where emotions are most activated. Without bringing up a specific conflict, just notice the part of you that wants to be understood, the part that wants to protect itself, the part that wants connection. Let all of those parts be welcome. DBT interpersonal skills are not about winning or pleasing. They are about effectiveness. Recognizing your needs, respecting the other person, and maintaining your self-respect. Simply notice what it feels like in your body to imagine responding from wise mind in your relationships. As we end, bring your attention back to the room. Notice the sounds around you. Feel your feet on the floor. Take one last slow breath in and out. When you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Everything we'll be learning in the DBT interpersonal effectiveness module relies on wise mind, pausing, noticing, and choosing how to respond rather than simply reacting. Okay. Few reminders. As I was going through the schedule for the practice sessions, I noticed that there's we still need one person for the first session of internal family systems. So if you're interested, email us And, what we'll do, we'll meet the person the week before. So this practice would be for April the 8th, that we do it here together. And person would meet with me on April 1st. Okay. And it's not a joke. So yeah, if you're thinking you'd like to do that, email us and we'll take first come, first serve. All right. Homework from last week. This is the homework for the coming week. So submit your questions. This is a change from before. So read Simple Manual Session 26. That's the grade book, which is on spirituality and mental health. Okay. And continue doing all the stuff you were doing before: crisis plans, diary cards, chain analysis, rational mind remediation, goals diary cards. Keep working on that. And continue tracking all the skills you've learned using the skills list and practicing your skills. Okay, that's the homework habit checklist. Reminders about participant agreements. I think we're pretty good about that now. It's weekly announcements. Don't have any weekly announcements. Other than, yeah, it's one more week before we go on the break. All right. So questions whose answers we'll read out today. All right. So last week, session 19, right? We talked about dissociation, structural dissociation theory, and the 3 stages of trauma therapy. So yeah, I talked about, staying in the window of tolerance, the first stage, developing, ability to self-soothe, processing trauma, and then reclaiming your life, 3 stages. So the person is asking, is grief also considered a trauma that might cause people to dissociate? And if so, do the 3 stages of trauma therapy also apply to its treatment? Okay, treatment of grief. All right. So grief through the lens of the nervous system. So when someone we love dies, hold on, I don't remember what was there. Hold on. Okay, grief is not just an emotional reaction; it's also biological. There's a biology to grief, in which our nervous system moves through predictable stages. So we can think of grief in 3 broad stages. So the first phase of grief is called protest. And protest, your sympathetic activation, fight or flight, all right? And what it looks like is that you're crying, you're searching, you're agitated, and you're urinating, all right? So that's the first phase. The second phase of grief is despair. And in polyvagal theory, that's dorsal, that's the handbrake, dorsal shutdown. So second stage of grief, people slow down, they feel heavy, and they withdraw. Okay. Now, some people, if grief becomes a problem, they stay stuck there. The third phase of grief is where you're beginning to process it or come out of grief a little bit, and it can take a long time, different for every person. But the third phase of grief is integration. And you're moving from using the handbrake, so the dorsal vagal, and you're moving into using the foot brake, ventral vagal. And if you know, ventral vagal is about connection. So to integrate, because the dorsal vagal feels you're not in the world anymore, you've gotten off the world, right? But when you move from dorsal vagal to ventral vagal, you're having to rejoin the world. You're having to make connections again, right? Connect with yourself, connect with others, connect with meaningful occupation, connect with nature, connect with, a bigger. So that's the key, is that you have to move from dorsal vagal shutdown to ventral vagal connection, right? And what that looks like is sadness with connection and meaning making. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about each of those phases. So protest asks, where are you? Right? That's your nervous system is asking, where are you? About the person that died. At first, when we lose someone, our nervous system mobilizes. We cry, surge, feel panic, anger, and longing. From an attachment perspective, this is protest behavior. The system is trying to bring the person back. From a polyvagal perspective, this is sympathetic activation. So you're activated, you're really, you can't sleep, your system is really going, right? This is adaptive. It means we love the person. We're looking to get that person back, right? Phase 2 is despair. And it asks, what's the point? So when protest doesn't bring the person back, we shift into a slower, heavier state. We may feel numb, empty, exhausted, and withdrawn. This is dorsal vagal activation, handbrake, a shutdown response. But there are two kinds of dorsal states. So A is traumatic collapse. People feel frozen fear, shame, dissociation. And then B is grief slowing, a biological quieting that allows for conservation of energy, reduced stimulation, and internal processing. Healthy mourning usually involves a second type, a natural slowing down. But then you move into phase 3, which is integration. Sadness, where you reconnect with the world. And if you think about PTSD, it's very similar, or the trauma spectrum disorders. Because you go into dorsal vagal slowdown, and you're shut off from the world in PTSD, right? And to recover from PTSD, what do we have to do? We have to reconnect. So we have to move from dorsal vagal into ventral vagal again. So connection is key to the healing from PTSD. Very similar to what happens with grief, right? So phase 3 is sadness with connection. The goal of grief, because when you're PTSD, you want to stay isolated from the world. You want to stay in your house. You don't want to leave. But then you're not connecting, right? So you're not moving into ventral vagal, right? So the goal of grief is not simply to feel better, but to reach a point where we can remember the person, feel sad, cry, talk about them, and still feel connected to life in all those different ways, to other people, to meaningful occupation, etc. That is ventral vagal sadness or connected grief. Healthy grief is sadness with connection. It's very different from sympathetic panic and dorsal shutdown. Okay? I only have a couple more slides. So complicated grief is where you stay stuck in dorsal vagal, right? You stay withdrawn. You don't move into connection. So grief becomes pathological when the system gets stuck. Healthy grief moves between states. Pathology is stuckness. We might get stuck in sympathetic protest, so chronic anxiety, agitation, or in dorsal collapse, depression, numbness, dissociation. Movement is health, rigidity is pathology. In uncomplicated grief, even though we feel devastated, our personality stays integrated. We may cry in the morning, go to work in the afternoon, and feel waves of sadness. We are still one self moving between states. And that's so critical in grief that people just want to go and stay in dorsal, but it's so healthy to kind of keep going, even though you don't feel like it. And it's the same thing in PTSD, to keep seeking those connections instead of withdrawing and staying in dorsal vagal. In traumatic or complicated grief, something different happens. This often happens when the loss is sudden, violent, guilt-ridden, or layered on prior trauma. So if you have a lot of other trauma before, right? When that happens, the experience may not integrate. Instead, the nervous system organizes into parts. One part, an emotional part, EP, becomes stuck in the moment of rupture, of grief, of losing that person. So here, you're seeing that same thing happens with PTSD as with grief, right? Same mechanism. That part may hold sympathetic protest, saying, where are you? And or dorsal despair, nothing matters. This part is not grieving in present time. It is living in the moment of the hospital room, if that's where you last saw the person, the phone call, that's how you learned about the accident scene, right? So that part, the emotional part, is living in trauma time, very much like PTSD. Another part, the apparently normal part. So this is like, we talked about structural dissociation theory last week. This is structural dissociation theory, may avoid the loss. It may continue going to work, avoiding reminders and saying, I'm fine, but it isn't integrated. It's just surviving. So, and that, when you have that split between the emotional part and the apparently normal part, that's very much what trauma spectrum disorders are like, and grief can be like that too. So this is complicated grief, where you never moved past that trauma. Trauma spectrum disorders are a pathology of time. Part of the person is stuck in the past. Right? And I think this is the last slide, because I want to give you time. This is almost 2 hours already. No. Okay, so healthy mourning versus associated grief. So in healthy mourning, we move between states. Sadness, we're sad in the present time. We have tears of connection, meaning making it possible, and you can approach the memory of that person, right? In traumatic dissociative grief, we have those segregated parts, the EP, AMP part, stuck in time, the EP, panic or collapse when reminded, meaning frozen or shattered, and avoidance of memory. You can't go there. Okay. So the 3-stage, because the question is also like, do you use the same model, the 3 stages of trauma therapy, you use that in grief as well. So 3-stage model, how it applies to grief. Stage 1, stabilization. If we approach trauma too quickly, the emotional part floods by panicking or collapsing. So we need to widen the window of tolerance. So it's kind of the same thing, right? So if you're doing trauma therapy, and if you have pathological or grief, this can also help. This allows the apparently normal part to tolerate contact with grief without being overwhelmed. So you have to expose yourself a little bit to those memories, right? Then trauma processing, here the stuck part begins to realize this happened in the past. The goal of phase 2 in grief is not to erase the grief, but to unfreeze trauma time. The memory becomes something remembered, not you're reliving it all the time, like you do in PTSD, right? And then stage 3 is integration. Integration happens when the memory becomes autobiographical, and we can say he died, feel sadness, but not annihilation when we think about that. Grief becomes connected sadness, so you're connecting, right? Instead of a nervous system collapse, which is what pathological grief is. Okay? So example of healthy grief, I miss my mother every day. Sometimes I cry, I feel sad, but I'm okay. An example of pathological grief that is structurally dissociated. EP part says, she's gone, I can't survive. The apparent normal part says, I don't want to talk about it. The split is the problem, not the grief. So you have those 2 parts. Grief itself is not dissociation, but when grief overwhelms our integrative capacity, the nervous system organizes into parts. Grief becomes traumatic when a part of us remains stuck in the moment of rupture. Treatment helps that part realize time has moved forward, so grief can become sadness instead of trauma. Okay, and if you want to go back, take a look at that with a little bit more time, you can go to the website and look at the slides. Okay, that's it for me. Good back.
Do we need back? I don't know why my face is wrong. I'm just gonna point that out. I did not do this. Ah, both of them, yeah. Okay. Good morning. Hope everybody's staying cozy and warm on this snowy morning. Okay, as you know, we're going to talk about interpersonal effectiveness skills today. It's found on pages 207 and 241 in the 3 skills workbook. We are combining 2 weeks into one, just so you know. Last year we covered this topic over 2 sessions. So We're going to combine it all today, so please bear with us. We have lots of great examples and we hope you find a fun activity at the end. So we're going to get started. So just to have a quick overview here, I think all of us can relate that have you ever had a conversation wishing you had said something differently? It's me. Or agreed to something you didn't actually want to do? It's me too, I've done that. Or avoid a conversation because it felt too uncomfortable. It's me again. I think these are all relatable, right, in our lives. So interpersonal effectiveness skills will help us navigate exactly those moments. The skills we're going to talk about today will help reduce resentment, improve connection, and increase our confidence in social settings. They are especially powerful when paired with mindfulness. If you remember, mindfulness is the first step to communicating effectively by knowing how you're feeling and knowing what you really want and need. Today, we'll explore practical skills that you can start using immediately, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, or maybe in everyday interactions. Because healthy relationships aren't about being perfect. Remember that. It's not about being perfect. They're all about being skillful. And if I can leave you with this to start off with, when you say, excuse me, when you say yes to others, remember and be mindful that you're not saying no to yourself. Okay? We'll talk about how to say no here today. So that's just another how we incorporate. We have our emotional mind, our rational mind. If there's wise mind, we're going to really help foster that wise mind. We hope with the skills we're going to talk about today. Here's our updated DBT skills list. This is the distress tolerance skills. I'm not going to go through all that. There's 26. Wow. The mindfulness skills, we have 24 of them. Not that you have to do all of those, but we hope there's one or two that you find really, really helpful. And again, with the emotional regulation skills, that was the third component of the DBT workbook. And today we're talking about the fourth and final component of the green workbook, interpersonal effectiveness skills. And today we're going to talk about 12 of these skills. That's our checklist. Review that. We're just going to, before we dive into those skills, we're just going to give you some information on what are interpersonal skills. What are they all about? Okay. Interpersonal skills in a nutshell. Interpersonal skills are the skills required to effectively communicate and interact with others. Interpersonal skills can be subdivided into 4 sets. We have our social skills, right? When we're out and about in a public place with friends. There's listening skills. Listening skills are really, really important when it comes to interpersonal skills. Learning to listen attentively and understand. Assertiveness skills. And we're going to talk about the difference between passive and aggressive. Assertiveness skills are kind of that common medium, the one in the middle. That's what we're aiming for. It's all about expressing your point of view and what you want, but showing validation and understanding of the other person. And finally, there's negotiation skills, that compromise piece. That's all here too. Okay. Interpersonal effectiveness skills can be, this is highlighting what I just talked about. I'm not going to go read through all that, but we do encourage you to go back and review that material, just for the sake of time here. I want to take a few moments, if you can, to rate yourself between 0 and 10. 10 being the best, 0 being the worst. Think of that scale in relation to those 4 sets. So think of your social skills. And in your mind, or you can write it down on a piece of paper, give yourself a score between 0 and 10. Okay? Trying to understand rather than judging yourself, please. So for social skills, again, to highlight, these are the skills that help us initiate, build, and maintain relationships. They can include things like appropriate small talk. Hey, help me with the weather. If you're passing someone on the street, hi, how are you? Or joining conversations, maybe expressing interest, and responding to social cues. Social skills help relationships get started and create a sense of ease and connection. So take this moment to yourself. Where am I on that? 0, not so great, or 10, I think I'm pretty good. Okay. And then number 2, listening skills. Just to remember, listening skills help us understand others and feel understood. They include paying attention, not interrupting, reflecting back what we hear, asking clarification questions, and noticing tone and body language. Good listening reduces misunderstandings and helps regulate our emotions on both sides of the interaction. So again, take a moment to rate yourself 0 to 10. And 3, assertiveness skills. Assertiveness skills help us express our needs, feelings, and limits clearly and respectfully. They allow us to say yes, say no, make requests, and set boundaries without aggression or excessive apology. Assertiveness protects self-respect while still valuing the relationship. Again, rate yourself between 0 and 10. And finally, number 4, negotiation skills. Negotiation skills help us handle differences, conflicts, and competing needs. They include compromise, problem solving, validating the other person's perspective, and finding workable middle ground. Negotiation recognizes that in real relationship, no one gets everything they want, but everyone deserves to be heard. So give yourself a score. And that's just for your own personal reflection as we work through some of these skills today. And perhaps we'll highlight areas that you need to improve, that you want to work.
Sure. So intrapersonal emotional regulation skills are skills used to understand, manage, and modulate one's own emotional states. These include recognizing and naming emotions, identifying triggers and patterns, using mindfulness to stay grounded, applying distress tolerance techniques, i.e. self-soothing, distraction, opposite action, reframing thoughts to reduce emotional intensity. With intrapersonal emotional regulation skills, the goal is to regulate within yourself, keeping emotions from overwhelming or shutting you down. Interpersonal emotional regulation skills, by contrast, are used to manage emotions in relation to others, how you express feelings, set boundaries, ask for needs, and maintain relationships under emotional stress. This includes communicating assertively and kindly, listening and validating others' emotions, negotiating or problem-solving conflicts, balancing self-respect, relationship goals, and effectiveness. So the Dear Man, Give Fast. That's what Joan and I are really going to kind of focus on towards the end of today as well. And regulating emotions that arise during interactions. So anger, shame, fear, rejection. With interpersonal emotional regulation skills, the goal is to regulate interactions between people, keeping relationships stable and satisfying even when emotions run high. The DBT emotion regulation module teaches intrapersonal regulation, how to understand and manage your emotions. The interpersonal effectiveness module focuses on interpersonal regulation, how to navigate relationships and emotional exchanges with others skillfully. So the benefits of good interpersonal skills. Good interpersonal skills help us be more effective at dealing with people. They improve our chances of getting our needs met. They help us negotiate conflicts without damaging relationships. And they strengthen our self-respect by giving us alternatives to old damaging patterns of anger or withdrawal. So there's the 12 skills we'll be talking about.
Yes, and we noticed, Nicole and I did, that for some reason 8 isn't on there, but I think it is, 8 should be by knowing what you want. Just a typo there. Okay, so just a sec here. So first off, we're going to talk about mindful attention. And in addition to these topics we're going to cover, we're going to include some, we're going to cover Dear Man, Give, and Fast, which are really helpful acronyms that can help you when you're communicating with others. So mindful attention. It's not moving. There. Okay, here we are. Okay, so interpersonal skills require, as we've talked about, being mindfully attentive with others. In other words, that we be attuned to the other person's thoughts, feelings, and reactions, and truly pay attention to the communication process between us and them. Have you ever had, I know this happens to me. In fact, it happened yesterday. I got home and I was busy making supper, and I was really focused on this recipe I was trying. So I was kind of focused on all the steps and I was zoned in. And my husband came home and right away he had something to tell me, but I just wasn't paying attention because I was careful about, I was worried about I was going to put too much of this cumin spice, which is very, but I didn't want to put in what I was supposed to do. So I simply said to him, I'm sorry, but can you give me 1 second so I don't lose my place here on the recipe? Another time I know I've told my husband and he'll say, no, that's not true, but I'm going to share this. I told him that today I will be presenting and that I have a hair appointment later on, so I'll need the car. And then this morning he said, I didn't remember that. I don't remember you telling me. And I said, I did tell you a couple times 2 days ago, but obviously he was distracted and wasn't paying attention. So it's on me too. I have to make sure he's paying attention to when I have something important to share. Has that happened to other people? Can you relate? But mindful attention is really, really important. So mindfulness listening skills also involves paying attention to not just what other people are saying, but also to their facial expressions, body language, tone, and choice of words. So body language, are they looking at you? So often my husband will say, yeah, but he's not really looking at me. So I know that's a cue. I don't think you really heard me. So be mindful of that. Listening mindfully requires that we pay attention to everything the other person is saying, rather than being distracted and listening by focusing on your own thoughts and emotions and preparing what we were going to say or do next. So already jumping ahead, right? And interrupting. I know what you're going to say. It's this, right? So in the workbook, I believe it's on page 208, there's some little ideas to help you be more mindfully attentive. So there's some points there, but they're very common sense. Things like when you are ready to have a conversation and maybe you notice that they're not looking at you, simply lead in with, how are you feeling? Are you doing okay? Is this a good time for us to talk? And get them to respond before you start in on whatever you're going to talk about. Just be more in tune. You seem tired. Are you all right? What can I do to help? So that's on page 208, but I think that's pretty common sense. So that's one thing we have to be really mindful of as we lead into some of these skills that we're going to talk about. Okay.
Number 2, compassion for others. So all living beings experience pain and suffering. Compassion involves recognizing, empathizing with, and trying to reduce the pain of another living being. Compassion is an important part of healthy relationships. If we take a compassionate attitude, we recognize that given who they are, people are doing their best, even when they are being a-holes. In difficult interactions, it may be helpful to consider what the other person is or has gone through in their lives to get here. I took a DBT course a couple years ago online, and the one instructor who led it said, you know what? When I was driving on the highway and someone just blew right past me, in her head, rather than say, oh, what a jerk, what an a-hole, right? She goes, oh, I hope your partner, delivers a healthy baby, right? She's like, God knows what that person's going through. Maybe it was a physician, maybe it's a dad or a mom going to meet their new baby or whatever. So to kind of reframe your thinking, I know, especially driving for me, I was like, I got places to be, right? And all the construction in Stratford lately. So it's to say, you know what? They're trying to get it done as best as they can. I'm sure they don't want to be in -30 weather digging up a road. So trying to be compassionate and thinking about that for others. So what is the difference between compassion and empathy? So empathy is the ability to feel with another person. It involves sensing, resonating with, or understanding another person's emotional experience from the inside. I feel what you're feeling. Empathy can be emotional, feeling it in the body, or cognitive, understanding their perspective. It helps other people feel seen and understood. When unbounded, empathy can lead to emotional overload or burnout. We've talked to many patients who feel that they really take on other people's problems or concerns, and they feel it physically, and it burns them out quite emotionally as well. Compassion, on the other hand, is the ability to care about another person's suffering while staying grounded in the window of tolerance. It includes empathy, but adds kindness, perspective, and a wish to help without becoming overwhelmed. I care about your suffering, and I want to respond wisely. Compassion involves warmth, concern, and wise action. It supports boundaries and self-regulation, and it is more sustainable over time. The difference is empathy feels with, and compassion cares for. Empathy connects us emotionally, where compassion allows us to stay present without drowning. In DBT terms, empathy lives primarily in emotional mind. It involves emotional resonance, feeling another person's pain, fear, or distress in your own body. Have you ever heard of the terms like in his shoes or in her shoes or their shoes, right? You actually feel it as if you're living their own struggles. Empathy is essential for connection, but on its own, it can lead to over-involvement, loss of boundaries, or emotional flooding. When empathy causes a person to repeatedly be outside the window of tolerance, they may try to distance themselves, fix or minimize problems in order to manage their distress. This sounds reasonable, but often feels cold or invalidating to others. Compassion arises from wise mind. Wise mind integrates empathy with perspective, values, and regulation. From wise mind, we can care deeply without being pulled out of the window of tolerance. So wise mind compassion equals empathy plus grounding plus a choiceful action. An example. So here's the situation. A friend is very distressed and repeatedly is texting you late at night about their relationship crisis. Has anybody had that? Like I have, probably more than one occasion. Okay, so using empathy from emotional mind, you feel their pain so strongly that you stay up all night responding, even though you're exhausted and resentful the next day. So the connection without boundaries equals burden. A rational mind response might be, this is unreasonable. I can't deal with this. You're being so dramatic, right? Boundaries without warmth, it's going to rupture. Compassion from using the wise mind perspective. I care about them and I also need rest. I can acknowledge their pain now and set a limit, right? So the wise mind response might be, I can hear how painful this is for you and I do really care. I'm going to go to sleep now, but we can talk more tomorrow, right? You have the warmth, you set a boundary, and you also have your self-respect still intact. So empathy pulls us into the emotion, where compassion lets us stay connected while choosing an effective response.
So when we're talking about communication, it's really important that we learn what our behavior we primarily lean towards. Are we more passive behavior or aggressive behavior? Or are we somewhere in the middle, which is assertive? So communication styles lie on a spectrum ranging from passive to assertive to aggressive. Each style has benefits and drawbacks. So with the passive, oops, there. You know, this can feel safe. Like for me, I think I lean more towards a passive communication style because it feels safe. I don't like conflict. I'll just go along with it to avoid conflict. That's me. Even though I don't want to. And that can be problematic because in the long term, it can build inside you a little sense of resentment, and then you might have a little meltdown and have an outburst eventually. So passive feels safe because we go with the flow and avoid. Yeah, that's me. But requires us to abandon our own needs and creates a buildup, as I said, of that frustration and resentment over time. And you may eventually have a meltdown. You may blow up and become, then you'll feel guilty that you did that. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. You'll feel depressed. You might just run away. It tends to destroy relationships in the long term. It is more common in the avoidantly attached person. Now, for the aggressive communication style, on the other spectrum, is often present when people have a strong sense of how things should be, right versus wrong. They're very opinionated. It's their way or no way. Very strong core beliefs. It's associated with a desire to control others. We use it when we apply pressure to try to control situations and get our own way. It often is associated with anger, and that comes out usually in the tone that things are being communicated. But the problem is, it makes people afraid and pushes them away. People avoid you if you're overly aggressive. It too tends to destroy relationships in the long term. So the happy medium is assertive in the middle there. And the skills we're talking about today are going to help foster an assertive communication style. And the aggressive is more commonly in the anxiously attached individual. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Passive, assertive, and aggressive. 3 ways to handle a situation. So here's the situation. A friend often interrupts you while you're talking. I've done that. I'm guilty of doing this sometimes. Passive response, if I'm being interrupted, it's fine. I probably talk too much anyways. You say that quietly to yourself, right? You give up your voice. That's what you're doing to keep the peace. The emotion underneath is resentment, hurt, or powerlessness. The outcome, the friend doesn't realize there's a problem. Friend that's talking to you, and you feel unheard. Okay, that's being passive. Let's go to aggressive first before we do assertive. So at the bottom there, aggressive response. You always interrupt me. You're so rude. You're asserting your need by attacking or blaming. The emotion underneath, it's frustration and anger, maybe. The outcome, the other person feels defensive and the conflict will probably increase. So let's look at the middle ground, the assertive response. I really value our conversations. When I get interrupted, I lose my train of thought. Could I finish what I was saying before you jump in? So there you're expressing your needs respectfully, I believe, and clearly. The emotion underneath, you're showing self-respect to yourself, right? And you're also caring for the relationship. The probable outcome of that is that you're heard and the relationship can adjust and grow. There's another situation. A coworker, not Nicole and me, trust me. A coworker leaves a shared workspace messy. A passive response might be, oh, well, I'll just clean it up. It's easier that way. You avoid conflict, but build silent frustration, and the problem continues. I've done that, you pick up after everybody and you just do it and it continues. They assume you're going to do it. Maybe they don't know how you truly feel. Aggressive response, we'll skip to the bottom first. You're such a slob. Clean up your mess or I'm reporting you. You're expressing your frustration by attacking that individual. And probably the relationship will suffer and resistance will increase. Assertive response, best way to approach this may be, hey, I noticed the tables get messy after we work here. Can we agree to clean up before leaving so we both have a cleaner space? In this case, you're describing the issue without blame and you invite cooperation. The relationship stays respectful and productive. See that? You use the word we, you're not pointing the finger saying you, just a little nicer approach of communicating. Just want to talk briefly about boundaries versus threats. We really stress the importance of healthy boundaries with our patients, especially if there is a situation in a relationship where they're feeling burned out because someone is always asking them to do something or they're interfering in their lives in unhealthy ways. So it's really, we stress these boundaries. So just to compare the differences between a boundary and a threat. A boundary is something you set to take care of yourself. It defines what you will do to protect your well-being, your values, and safety without requiring the other person to change. These are boundaries you set for yourself. Okay, for an example, if you raise your voice, I'm going to step outside until we can talk calmly. It's a boundary, and you leave. Here you're telling them what to do. You're saying what you would do, right? You're saying it calmly. Okay? If you raise your voice, I'm going to step outside until we can talk calmly. Setting that boundary, and you leave. Okay? A key feature of a boundary is that it's about your behavior, not somebody else's. It's non-controlling. They remain free to choose their own actions. It's consistent and calm, not reactive or punitive. It comes from self-respect, not power or fear. In essence, a boundary protects your space. It doesn't invade others. On the other hand, a threat tries to control someone else's behavior through fear or pressure. It's a demand followed by a punishment if the person doesn't comply. So for an example, saying, if you raise your voice again, you'll regret it. Is that threat in there? This is not about protecting yourself. It's about forcing compliance. Key features of a threat are that it's about changing the other person's behavior. It's controlling, it's emotionally charged, it's often said in anger or frustration, and can really damage trust and safety rather than building it. So that's the key difference. Boundaries, self-respect, something you do for you. Threats are, controlling, and you're trying to control the other person.
Okay, so the next one, number 4, do a couple more and then have a little bit of a break. So it's I want, they want ratio. So typically in relationships, each person wants and tries to get their needs met. Sometimes both people want the same thing and there are no conflicts, which is great. Other times, however, people's needs conflict. To communicate effectively when our needs conflict with those of others, we must first know what we need and be able to clearly express it. Second, know what the other person needs. 3, compromise so that both we and the other person can get some part of what we need. And 4, give what we can to meet the other person's needs. So in DBT, interpersonal effectiveness, we aim to balance what I need or want, what the other person wants or needs. Problems arise when the ratio is lopsided. So all I want, right, is more of the aggressive, entitled relationship damaging. And all they want is passive, self-erasing, resentment building. Effectiveness lives right in the middle. So an example of a situation. I laughed when Dr. Clado shared me this because I just thought of the hospital when I read this. You want a weekend off, your manager wants full staffing. So all they want, which is understandable, right? It's fine, I'll work. I don't want to cause problems, right? So it's ratio skewed away from yourself. Immediate peace, long-term resentment, and burnout. All I want is ratio skewed away from the relationship. I'm not coming in. That's your problem, right? Has anyone heard that? That's a you problem. Has anyone heard that saying? Short-term relief damages the relationship and there are consequences. A balanced DBT ratio using a wise mind approach. I've worked the last 3 weekends and I'm feeling burned out. I'd like this weekend off. I know coverage matters. Can we look at options together? Right? It has self-respect. You're taking into consideration of maintaining that relationship, and you're also offering to help them problem solve their issue. So DBT asks, how can I speak in a way that honors what I want while acknowledging what they want, right? So too much I want is a control. Too much of what they want is the collapse. So fine, I'll come into work. I don't want to, but I will. Our wise mind is a balance and it's more effective and it will help maintain that relationship as well.
Okay, so very similarly, there's some crossover here. The I want, I should ratio. Again, it's all about balance. Okay, so every relationship requires keeping a delicate balance between seeking what you want to do, the I wants, and doing what you think you should be doing. Okay, so let's explore this a bit further. So I want comes from the emotional mind. It reflects urges, feelings, fears, angry, and longing. It often sounds like, I want to avoid this, or I want them to understand. I want to explode or disappear. The I should comes from rule-bound rational mind. It reflects duty, guilt, social rules, self-criticism. It often sounds like, I should be nicer. I shouldn't have said that. I should have just sucked it up. I should know better. Oh, I should work that shift at the weekend. I should. But the problem is too much I wants. It's more impulsive, reactive behavior And too much I should is resentment, shame, and emotional suppression. You're not taking care of yourself. So wise mind emerges when neither dominance are both acknowledged, right? A healthy interpersonal stance usually sounds like, I want X and I understand Y, so I'll do Z. That is wise mind integrating the emotional truth he wants with values, facts, and long-term goals. That's the shoulds. And in the workbook on page 215, there is an exercise of the shoulds to help you kind of understand more if you're more I want or I should. So they just ask you to place a check mark next to the items that describes your beliefs or feelings. So for an example, the first one, you should try to give everything that's asked of you in a relationship, even when it means putting your own needs aside. So always putting others first, putting yourself on that back burner. And sometimes we do that in life, and that's okay. But if that's always the case, eventually what will happen is that you're going to feel burnout. You're not acknowledging your own well-being, right? You're going to hold that resentment. So if you select a lot of those boxes, it indicates the stronger your belief about the right and wrong way to relate with others, and the more likely you are to deny your own needs in a relationship. So going back to Nicole's example at the hospital, I can count, and I'm not lying, and it's not their fault. I worked there for 15 years on the inpatient unit and in the outpatient mental health department. I can count literally on my one hand how many days that I had off that I did not get called to come in and work. On my one hand, over 15 years. So you have a stretch of time off. I was always getting called. Please come and help. We need your help. Can you do this? Can you do that? I can count on my one hand how many days I was not asked to receive a phone call. And so I always answered, and a lot of the time I would go in because I felt so bad. I felt so bad. I put myself, my own want aside, and I said, I should go in. That's a call of duty. They need my help. So I would always stand up and go in. But you know what? It ended up wearing on me. I was tired, and I had that a bit of resentment there for that. So I had to come to terms with that. You have to have that balance. I want, I should. It's really, really important. Here's some other examples. So, your partner is late again. Oh, your emotional mind. I want is heavy. I want to yell. I want them to know how disrespectful this is. Your over-controlled rational mind, the I should, which is heavy. I should be more understanding. I should not make a big deal out of this. Look what wise mind does. More balanced view of the situation. I want reliability. And I also know things happen. I should speak up calmly so this doesn't keep building. See the balanced view. The resulting behavior. Now they're using Dear Man style, and Nicole and I will explain what Dear Man is in a little bit, but just to highlight Dear, the D stands describe, E is for express how you feel, A is assert yourself, and R is reinforce. So in this situation, the resulting behavior using that Dear Man style, when you were late, without telling me, that's describing the situation. When you were late without telling me, I feel frustrated. That's the E, you're expressing your feelings. The A says, I would like a text if you're running late so I can plan better. That's asserting yourself. And if you have to, you can reinforce that again. Okay. Sample 2, boundary setting. A friend asks for a last minute favor and you don't want to do it. Oh, goodness. Emotional mind says, I want to say no and never help again. The over-controlled rational mind says, I should say yes. They need me. Wise mind says, I want rest tonight and I value being a supportive friend. I can say no this time without rejecting. And we'll talk about saying no. A two-step process. It works very effective. So wise mind response might be, I can't help tonight, but I could another day. Don't give them a reason. Don't give a reason. Don't say you're too tired. Just say, oh, you can see later. You open up the door for a debate, and we'll talk more about that in a bit.
All right. Number 6, key interpersonal skills. So 1, knowing what you want. So clearly express what you're feeling, thinking, and what you want. Asking for what you want, second step, in a way that protects the relationship. The next section of the workbook will give us a method for doing this in a way that is effective. Right? So saying, like that example that Joan just said, knowing what you want. So I want my partner to notify me if they're running late and asking for your want. So you wouldn't say, you need to be more respectful of me, right? You, defensive, they're probably going to come back and argue with you. So just saying, like Joan had said, you know what, I really appreciate a text or just give me a heads up about how long, because I really want to have dinner on time for when you get home, right? And then 3, negotiating areas of conflicting wants. So recognize that each person's needs are valid and that to have a good relationship, you need to compromise. So using like the dinner example, so my husband coaches our kids hockey. And so if I was saying, you need to give me a text so I can have dinner ready, he's gonna be like, I don't have my phone with me, right? So it's like, okay, so before he does practice, I'm like, okay, is there dry land after, right? How long's the dry land? He might say 30 minutes. Okay, so what time are you thinking you'll be home? Oh, probably around 6:37. Perfect, good enough for me, right? So we balance our thinking. But if I just went on the calendar, which doesn't have the extra dry land training on it, I would have dinner ready for 6:30 and just be like, where have you been, right? How many times has that happened where you run into, just give me a text, I don't have my phone, or I didn't look at it, and how things can escalate so fast. So being able to say, okay, how can we, especially if you run into the same patterns, the same arguments, it's good to say, okay, where are things going awry here, right? Oh. Oh, technology. Okay, there we go. Let's stop moving it.
You can't get rid of the menu bar.
Oh, there we go. Yay! Dr. Cleto almost stands up and then we're good. Okay, number 4, getting information. So to communicate effectively, you must understand what the other person's needs, fears, and hopes for. 5, saying no. This is such a big one, in a way that protects the relationship, right? Learning to say no in an assertive way that sets firm boundaries while validating the other person's needs is an important part of effective communication. So saying like, no way, or like even the tone and how you say that, but saying it being like, oh, really can't help you out today, right? Not going to happen today. Once again, sorry, right? 6, acting according to your values. So reflect on your values and the kinds of relationships you want. Learn how to act in ways that incorporate your values into your relationships. So trustworthiness, loving, committed, truthful, and transparent. This is 7 and 8.
7 and 8. Lots to using interpersonal skills. Don't spend a lot of time on this, but we encourage you to go back and review. And when you have time, but just want to highlight some of the obstacles to effective communication. I think this is pretty common sense. So if you're too aggressive and we speak in a tone that's very abrupt or irritable, you kind of turn people off and they'll tune you out, or they won't want to engage with you and they'll just leave. Passive habits, if we shut down, we surrender or give in to someone to avoid conflict, like we said, the passive style. This, as we know in the long term, can lead to your own resentment and frustration because you're not getting your own needs met. If you have overwhelming emotions, like if you're in a conversation, going into a difficult conversation, already out of the window of tolerance, you know that the emotions are in the forefront and it may prevent you from getting a healthy outcome to the conversation. So be mindful of how you're feeling and failure to identify needs. So communication skills fail when you don't know what we want, because then we can't ask for what we need. So clearly write down what you want. We're going to talk about assertiveness scripts. We can't stress enough how helpful those are. If you write it down and you read it, especially if it's going to be a stressful conversation, so you don't and throughout it and stumble, that the whole point is not clearly communicated on what you want. If you have it written down because you know it's going to be challenging, just read what you have written down ahead of time. Fear can push us to use aggressive or aversive communication strategies or causes to avoid, right? Common sense. And toxic relationships. It's difficult to use effective construction communication skills when we are engaged with people who consistently use negative, destructive ones, right? And myths. Myths are core beliefs we hold about relationships, such as 1, we can't ask for what we need. 2, we can't say no, right? Right? And then tying into this is knowing your rights. So how do we know that what we're asking for is legitimate and neither too little or too much? And again, I'm just going to highlight a few of these. Know your rights. You have the right to, and highlight ones that really resonate with you. We encourage that. 1, to need things from others. That's your right to ask for help if you need it. To sometimes put yourself first, and that's okay. It's okay. And it's your right to feel and express your emotions and pain. It is your right. It's number 7. It's your right to protest any mistreatment or criticism that makes you feel bad, right? Feels bad to you. It's okay to speak up. And 8, it's very important. We talk about negotiation, to negotiate for a change, make that compromise. And 10, we can't highlight this enough, to say no. It's okay to say no. And to keep a healthy relationship, there is a 2-step process that really works really well, and we'll share here in a few minutes. And you have the right to not take responsibility for someone else's problems. Can't take it all on. If we know what we want, what's a good way to ask for it? Okay. Knowing what we want. If you're in a interpersonal situation that requires some negotiation, identify and state the feelings you were experiencing about this situation, and we can use the Dear Man to help with this as well. Put those feelings into words, not a long, lengthy paragraph or story. You just keep it short and sweet. Say, I feel hurt. I feel frustrated. I feel annoyed, right? State what you would like the other person to change, do more of, less of, stop doing, start doing. But don't incorporate a bunch of changes. Pick one that really resonates with you and start there. Organize all this information into 1 or more clear sentences and write it down and practice. Say it out loud to yourself in a private space. Try saying it into the mirror before you head into the actual interaction. Okay, number 9.
Okay, I'll do this one and then does anyone want a break? 25 after? Yeah, we'll do 9 and then maybe have a quick break. Okay, modulating the intensity of a request. So increase or decrease the intensity with which you ask for what you want or need by considering 1, how urgent is my need for what I'm asking? How vulnerable is the other person or the relationship to this request? So clearly, if somebody worked a 12-hour shift and you're like, I really want to talk about finances, right? And they get home from work and they are exhausted and you're like, I just really need to know, right? Is it urgent that we need to know it by 10 p.m. tonight? Probably not, right? We're not doing forums or something the next day. So you really need to say, okay, this person's exhausted. They come home and they actually say, they throw their stuff down. Awful day today. And you're not going to say, okay, let's have a serious conversation because they're vulnerable, right? So you really have to use your judgment here. If you know that person well, it's to say, how vulnerable are they? What's their gas tank, right? What's their energy reserve today? So you rate your urgency of your need and vulnerability of the other person in relationship on a scale from 1, low urgency of need, and the person in relationship highly vulnerable, to 10. So low is 1, 10 is high. So high urgency. With less urgent needs and more vulnerable person relationships, we want to dial down the intensity of asking. So say your partner comes home, they've had a long shift at work, and you can just kind of say, listen, I see you're exhausted and frustrated. I do want to talk about this at some point, maybe tomorrow, right? Bring it to their attention like, hey, I see where you're at right now. I'm going to give you a little bit of space and downtime. At the same time, I really do want to talk about this, but we can talk about it later, right? With more urgent need and less vulnerable person. So they went to work, come home, best day ever, maybe 12 hours, you're pushing it, maybe an 8-hour shift. And the person comes home in a good mood. That might be like, hey, we really need to talk about our finances, or we really need to talk about what the kids are doing for after school stuff, like something like that. So you really, this is good if you really know the person before you're kind of going in to ask those heavy questions. So, okay, why don't we have a 10-minute break?
Yeah, and when we come back,
Yes.
we're going to talk about making a simple request and those assertiveness scripts and how to say no. It's one of my favorites.
Yes.
And then we're gonna, yes,
Lauren?
thank you. So we're going to talk about making a simple request here next. And I don't know if you guys, making requests is a necessity of taking care of ourselves. But for me, like a simple request, like asking somebody for directions, I find that nerve-wracking. I don't know if anybody can relate. Like my husband, he has no trouble pulling over and rolling down the window and asking someone for directions. Yeah, but I do. I said, no, we can figure this out because I get anxious because that's a stranger and what they're going to say, but it's our right to make a simple request. How about a situation in a restaurant and you don't like where you're sitting? Or you didn't like the food that was served to you and you want it sent back and prepared properly. How many of you would just, oh, I'll just tolerate this table that's right by the kitchen, it's noisy and it's not very comfortable, or I'll just eat the food even though it's not done to my liking. It's me. However, yeah, so that's not good either. So this exercise, making a simple request, if that's a problem area for you, try the exercise in the book. I think it's really, to practice getting more comfortable making a simple request. Okay, so in the book, they give you some, just some easy steps by softening statement. I'd be so apologetic. I'm terrible at this. I would say, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm kind of lost here. Can you tell me how to get to whatever this place? Or in a restaurant, I would say, I'm very, very sorry. I'm sorry, but this chicken is not done to my liking. Can you send it back? And I'll apologize over and over and over again. But you soften it. You say, would you mind? You can be apologetic, but not overkill like me. Would you mind if? It would be helpful if. I appreciate if you would. that opening statement, right, can be helpful. This is on page 233. Write down some of these and practice them if you have trouble making a simple request. Then they ask, they encourage you to be direct with your specific question. I'm sorry to bother you. I would appreciate if you could give me directions to that restaurant, uptown, maybe Bentley's or Pazos. Thank you very much. And then an appreciation statement, something short and sweet. Thank you very much for your help. This really helps me. Just as thank you. Keep it short and sweet. Okay. All right. So write down if this is a problem area and practice them. Practice some common scenarios to help you get more comfortable with making these simple requests. Now, tying in with that, before we go on to assertiveness scripts, we don't have a slide here on how to say no. And honestly, this is one of our favorites. Saying no is okay. There is a two-step process to saying no in a really respectful and appropriate way. So validate. Step one, validate the other person's needs or desires. I'll give an example here in a minute. And two, state your clear preference not to do it. That's it, 2 steps. Validate and state your preference not to do it. Okay, so this is really, really helpful in those situations when somebody catches you off guard with a question or a request. Can you look after my child tomorrow? I need your help. Can you look after my child? And inside you're going, oh, I don't want to. I don't want to. For whatever reason, you just don't want to. You can validate. You say, I understand that you need someone to look after your child, but I'm not available this time. And leave it at that. Do not, let me make it very clear, do not open the door for a debate by giving a reason why you can't do it. Don't lie and say, oh, I have a dentist appointment, or I have to do this, or I have to do, don't. Just clearly say, I understand you need someone to look after your child. Unfortunately, this time I'm not available, but maybe next time, period. And if they say, why not? You say, I'm sorry, I'm just not available. I'd be happy to help you next time. Hope you find someone, period. If you open the door to giving a reason why you can't, it gives the other person opportunity to debate and offer a solution to that. So if you said, I can't because I'm going to the dentist, they'll say, oh, you can call and reschedule. I've done that before. See what happens? And then you're stuck going, beans. Okay. The book gives another example. These are kind of common things. Like, let's say you're going out to the movies with a friend and they want to see the new action-packed, what's his name? The Rock. What's his real name? Wayne Johnson?
Yeah, that's
it. He has this action-packed movie coming up. It's blockbuster, and there, you've heard reviews. There's a lot of gun violence in it, and you don't want to see that kind of movie. You want to see the rom-com with Jennifer Aniston or somebody like that. So how do you get say no to that? Let's go to the action movie. Come on, let's go. You say, you know what? I understand action movies are a lot of fun and that's what you want to see, but I prefer to see the rom-com this time. We can see the action movie next time. Just validate. I understand they can be fun. No, you want to see it. I prefer to see the rom-com. Okay. Yeah, so give that a try on page 242. It's a very short exercise, but honestly, 2 steps. Validate the other person and state your preference not to do it. You don't say no, so state your preference. Not available. Sorry, I can't help you. And if you're caught in that moment and you're getting tongue-tied and you don't know what to say, another great approach is saying, I'll have to get back to you. I'll have to think about it. I'll have to get back to you. I'm not sure what my schedule is like. Can I think about it? I'll get back to you tomorrow and give a timeline. That's okay to not give an answer at all. Okay. Give that a try. Very, very, very helpful. We can't stress it enough. Say no.
Okay, designing basic assertiveness scripts. So basic assertiveness scripts, as you can see there in the little diagram, I'm okay, you're okay. So using the assertive approach. I'm okay, you're not okay. That's using an aggressive approach. I'm not okay, but you're okay. That's the passive approach. Sure, I'll come in and work, right? I'm not okay, you're not okay. The passive aggressive approach. So number one, I think, focus on the facts, not judgments or assumptions. So you can't say, I think you're a jerk because of the way you talk to me, right? You know that that's not going to get very far in a effective communication. So I feel is the next one. Give a brief, non-judgmental description of any emotion triggered by a situation. Don't dress up you statements as I statements. Example, I feel that you are selfish. Once again, there's that defensiveness, and we'll talk about that in the coming weeks here, about that defensive person and how you kind of continue that communication pattern. Third, I want. State what you want, like what the person to do. So make sure that you request, one, a behavioral change, two, one change at a time. So don't make a laundry list of things for the person to change. Something that can be changed now in the moment. So you never say, you know, I want you to be, when we go to the movies next, and you don't go very often, I want you to be more attentive to my needs, you know, and try not to laugh so loud because I get embarrassed, right? That may be 6 months down the road, and that person's not going to remember the request that you made. All right. And then D, something specific and concrete. And then the fourth one is a really good, it's kind of like that bow to the present, an appreciation, reinforcement, or self-care statement. So I can give an example. First thing this morning, my daughter is super crafty and I love her to bits. Her room is a disaster zone all the time. So when I clean it up, within an hour, she's in there cutting little pieces of yarn. There's beads everywhere. If anyone has young girls, I feel like, and those little elastics that make bracelets. So it's everywhere all over her room. And so I walk in and I say, you know what? I think your room's a little bit messy this morning, Emma. And I feel, right? I feel like you could maybe do more crafts and be a little bit more organized. You can do maybe more crafting. And I'd really like you to pick up after yourself, right? And an appreciation statement. I think you are the most crafty kid. You're so talented. And I love that for you, right? But this messy room, I almost killed myself yesterday. I tripped on a yo-yo, middle of the floor, right? So I appreciate that you have the crafting ability and I appreciate your talent. I'd really appreciate if you just kind of picked up some of the, like the yarn and the beads. That really helped me out, right? Versus going in there and saying, your room is a disaster. How can you live like this, right? Because then she just either shuts down and she doesn't hear what I'm asking her to do, right? They're far more receptive. People are, as if you sum at the end, this would really help me out because it's really anxiety provoking for your mom, right? So she was far more receptive with that approach. We'll see how tomorrow is. Could be a completely different day. Here's hoping. An example of an assertiveness script. So we tell people, especially a lot of our patients talk about insurance companies, right? And how much pressure and stress they put on them. So we really encourage them to write assertiveness scripts, even ahead of time. You kind of know the questions that they're going to ask you. And like Joan said, if there is a question that comes at you versus just saying, yeah, no, I'll be good to go back to work. And then the person's like, I can't believe I just said that, right? Is to be able to kind of say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to get back to you, right? And the question, and they may say, well, why don't you know? You know what? Once again, I need some time to think about it and I'll get back to you. Okay? So the I think, I've been working against a deadline and haven't had time to cook dinner. I feel I'm pretty anxious and overwhelmed that I might not get this done. I want, could you whip up something together from leftovers so I can keep working? And the self-care, if that doesn't work for you, I can order pizza, right? Has anybody been doing maybe not necessarily a dinner thing, but has anyone been in this situation where you're just wanting the other person to help out and then eventually things get heated and you're like, why didn't you, like, you see how stressed I am? Like, how couldn't you help me? Right? But taking a breath and saying, okay, I've got a lot of stress on my plate. I feel like last night, Jonah and I were thinking about today, so maybe that would have been helpful, is to kind of say, I'm kind of worried about tomorrow. We got a big presentation. That's that, you know, your partner or somebody knowing who you are and saying, okay, Nick is vulnerable tonight. I'm not going to say, can you just make up some dinner, you know, take out the chicken and stuff, is to say, you know what, I really appreciate if somebody could, you know, whip up something quick for dinner. If not, we'll just order pizza. I mean, my kids would always opt for that last option. And the last one is assertive listening.
Yes.
Forget.
Okay, so assertive listening, we'll just touch real quick because we have some examples and then we have a little activity we want to get to. We always remember with assertive listening that communication is a two-way street. It's not just about your needs and wants, it's also about the other person or persons. So actively listening will help you better understand what other people want and need and how they might conflict with your own wants and needs. So actively listening, and just so you know, Nicole and I had nothing to do with that illustration. We like
Listening to her heart.
Yeah.
the old-fashioned way of listening to a heart is to
It's not looking.
on someone. So actively listening questions include, what's the central issue for you? How do you make sense of the situation? What are you struggling with? Does that make you feel? What do you think needs to change and what you would like me to do to help with this? So blocks to it is assuming what the other person is feeling, thinking or feeling. Sometimes that's when you interrupt the conversation. Oh, I know what you're going to say. You're assuming. Let them finish their thought. Rehearsing, planning what you're going to say. Okay, before time, that could be a good thing too. But first listen to what the other person is saying and get a clear understanding before responding. Filtering, listening only to what is relevant to you. So hearing that one word, we have two golden retrievers, and if you say the word biscuit, we could be saying, hey, come here, good girl. And then if I say the word biscuit, right away they know, they run to their little dish waiting for a biscuit. They hear that one word, sort of filtering out all the other, but listening to that. Judging, evaluating instead of trying to understand, and daydreaming, getting caught up in fantasies or memories, like kind of going in la la land when someone else is talking to you. Advising, focusing on suggestions and solutions. Sparring, invalidating the person by arguing or debating. Being right, ignoring communication that you were wrong. Derailing, changing the subject. And placating, agreeing too quickly. Just, before you really understanding the conversation. Okay, we want to just introduce Dear Man, Give, and Fast. These are acronyms that are going to help you. Just like that little two-step with saying no or assertiveness scripts, this can help you as well. We have worked with patients where they have the Dear Man workout sheet, and they write down what they're going to say before they go into an appointment. That's really stressing them out. They write it down using these acronyms, and it's been really, really helpful. And once you practice it, like reading off your sheet, it'll become more automatic where you can kind of think of it in your mind in the spur of a moment when you're in conversation with someone. So, Dear Man, clearly ask for what you want or say no, you get your objective met. Give is communicate with care and validation, protects the relationship. Fast will act with honesty and self-respect. So you're protecting your values and dignity, and we'll kind of go over what each one means. So, Dear Man, The D, it's an acronym. So D stands for describe, and I think you had a handout emailed to you explaining this, and people here in the room, we have a handout for you. State the facts only, without interpretation or blame. What actually happened, the facts. E is express your feelings using I statement. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel upset. Okay. Assert, make a clear, specific request or say no directly. What am I asking for or setting as a boundary? Assert what it is you want and reinforce, explain why it helps you. The M is mindful. That's staying focused and calm in that request. Don't get pulled into side arguments. Repeat your point as needed. A is appear confident. Steady voice, eye contact, relaxed posture. N is negotiate, that compromise. Be willing to problem solve or compromise when appropriate. What is an alternative if this exact request doesn't work? That's the dear man. Give stands for maintain, remember the caring for the relationship. G is gentle, be respectful, no attacks, threats, or sarcasm. I is interested. E, listen and show curiosity in about what the other person is saying and their point of view. B is validating them and acknowledge how the other person's feelings. That makes sense when you tell me that. E is being easy manner, using a calm, non-intense tone. A little warmth or humor might fit in here too. And then real quickly here with fast. Fast stands for, the F stands for fair, being fair to yourself and the other person. A, no in a brackets, apologies for existing. Don't apologize for having needs or values. Don't apologize for asking for something. That's your right. S, stick to your values, speak and act in line with what matters to you. And T, be truthful. Don't exaggerate, don't minimize, don't manipulate. Okay, so dear man in a nutshell gives results. Give protects the relationship, and fast protects self-respect. And here is on the website, here's another handout describing dear man, give, and fair. I'll just skip over that for the sake of time. And that is just another explanation what we just went through. Go back and review that. And then here is an example. What is our time? Okay, so Nicole and I will give maybe if we do one example, and then we're going to move ahead into a video clip that we have that we hope you'll find helpful. So examples of high emotion interpersonal situations, looking at those three acronyms, dear man, give, and fast. Okay, so we're going to look at each situation is shown in three steps. So one, how it was often handled poorly. The second one, we talk about what goes wrong. And three, how the same situation could be handled skillfully using the DBTs dear man, give, and fast. So situation is a partner keeps canceling plans at the last minute. So Nicole and I will play the part. Is this someone? No, I don't think this is okay. That's we'll do. We'll just go through it. Poorly handled. You always cancel. You obviously don't care about me. I'm sick of being treated like an afterthought. What's happening here? Right away, if you were that person listening to that. It's judgmental, right? Accusations, blaming. The emotions are pretty intense. That emotional mind's in the driver's seat. What do you think the other person's going to do? Put up the stop sign, get defensive, and maybe withdraw. So let's use give man or dear man first to handle the situation. Instead, say, describe. We've had 3 plans canceled in the last month. Those are the facts you're describing. I feel disappointed and unimportant when that happens. It's your E. You're expressing how you feel using the I statement. Then you assert what you want. I'd like more reliability around plans. Reinforce that. It would help me feel closer and more relaxed with you. Then M, mindful. Stay on topic. Don't bring up old grievances. A, appear confident, calm, steady voice, relaxed posture. And negotiate. If evenings are hard, could we plan shorter daytime meetups? There's a compromise. So using that same situation, using the GIVE acronym, it's all about how you say it. Remember, being caring of this relationship. You be G, gentle, no sarcasm or raised voice. Always seem interested. What's been making this hard for you? It asks. Validate. I get that your schedule has been overwhelming. An easy manner, warm tone, maybe even a smile. Fast is your self-respect. So fair to both you and the other person. No apologies. You don't have a reason to apologize. Stick to your values, that honesty and connection, and being truthful. No exaggerations like always or never. You never keep our plans. You're always late. Don't use those words. I think we'll skip it. That was another example. So we'll skip over that. We encourage you to go back and review that. Here's a role play that Nicole and I will do. Same situation handled in 2 ways. So first we're going to do role play. One is in the emotional mind. The context here is Alex. I'll be Alex. Nicole will be Jamie. We are partners. Jamie has canceled plans at the last minute again. So you canceled again. I shouldn't be surprised. You always do.
That's not fair. Things came up. You're overreacting.
Overreacting? I rearranged my whole evening. Clearly, I'm just not a priority for you.
I can't deal with this right now. Nothing I do is ever good enough for you.
Right. Just cancel next time without even pretending you care. Ugh. So did you notice the accusations? The judgments, the escalation, the withdrawal? Was there an outcome there? No. So let's use this using our acronyms in a different approach. Jamie, can I talk with you for a minute tonight? Okay. This is the 3rd time in the past month that our plans were canceled the day of. When that happens, I feel disappointed and kind of unimportant.
I didn't realize it felt that way to you.
What I'm asking for is more reliability when we make plans. It would help me feel closer to you and less anxious about scheduling time together.
I can see why that matters. My work days have been unpredictable lately.
And now we're using GIVE. That makes sense. I know you've been under a lot of pressure at work. Validating. And now I'm going to show some interest. Can you tell me what's been making evenings hard?
By the end of the day, I'm exhausted, and sometimes I just don't have it in me.
Negotiate a bit here. Would it work better if we planned shorter check-ins on work days and save longer plans for weekends?
Yes, that actually feels doable.
So fast self-respect. Thanks for talking it through. I wanted to be honest. without attacking you. See the difference? Was there a positive outcome? Positive resolution. And the number one thing is the relationship is maintained. Okay. We aren't going to do that. That was another exercise. We're going to skip down over these scenarios. We may come back to them if there's time after the video we show. So this is the Dear Man Give and Fast kind of prompts to help you in the next situation that you have with someone, and it just prompts you to fill in the blanks with what you need. Remember, Dear Man is all about getting what you want. The D is describe. So the facts, express your feelings. A is the assert what you need and reinforce that. M is being mindful, so stay on topic. A, appear confident and negotiate. Okay, and give is about maintaining the relationship, and fast is about self-respect. So let's skip over this right now, but just for the sake of time, we encourage you to go back and review some of those, because Nicole and I,
Can we stop the recording? And it's only because for people that will be. Okay, so for people that will be watching this session on YouTube later on, we are going to hold this and pause the next section as we're going to be interacting with both the Zoom participants and in-room participants. So for those of you on YouTube that are watching this, please go to the website, itssimple2021.com, go under news, and you'll find all of the slides that we're going to be discussing under news there for you to review. Okay, now you can pause the recording.